of the number one criteria for student success is teacher expectations. Well, if my teacher's been taught to expect less of me, then maybe they won't pull the best out of me. And so I thought, oh, I could get excited about possibly teaching Black studies. And then I'm a child of the 60s. I grew up during all the movements, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the women's liberation movement, the anti-war movement, and all those things impacted me and how I saw myself in the world. I never saw myself, for example, in the anti-war movement as enemies, because why? We're the same people. And as a conscious person, I understand that we label things certain ways to make people think certain things about them. But the reality is, I bleed, you bleed. I cry, you cry. I laugh, you laugh. And so my goal is to help the world come together. You know, one of my favorite songs is We Are the World, because that song resonates, focusing on the children. And that's where I think our focus must be, because it starts when we're young, these negative messages about ourselves and each other. How do we transcend those? How do we let them go? So I'm really excited about talking about diversity, because the reality is I'm diverse. I am a woman, that makes me diverse. I am a Black woman, that makes me diverse. I am a woman from Missouri who was raised in California, so I like to call myself a Midwestern girl plus. In other words, we have all these life experiences that make us diverse within ourselves. And then we belong to different groups. But within those groups, all those groups are diverse. There are lots of kind of Black women. There are lots of kind of women. There are lots of kind of folks from Missouri. There's a lot of kind of folks from California. So when we talk about diversity, we need to always know we're talking about ourselves. And then from there, as we go into different communities or different organizations or whatever we call them, we look at what are some of the values that have us connected to different groups. For example, there is a male culture. Women are trying to get into the male culture. The challenge is, how do we merge the cultures? How do we learn from each other? How do we see ourselves in each other? I am both masculine and feminine, and I'm very clear about that. And it was when I got a divorce that I really understood this, because I was having a massage and my masseuse said, you need to tap into your feminine energy. And I always thought of myself as very feminine. So I said, what do you mean by that? She said, when I'm massaging you, all I feel is masculine energy. And then I realized what a gift the divorce had been to help me respect men in a different kind of way. Because the energy that she was feeling was the breadwinner energy, the protector energy, locking doors at night energy, and all that we often just take for granted. We don't stop to think, oh, what a gift to have someone in my life who does these things or shares these things with me. And I think in understanding that, it helped me start to understand some of the conflict between us as different people. Because if I can't start to ask you questions about how are you feeling? What are you thinking? Do you realize that men cry all the time? Now we say that men don't cry. But when I realized that women cry like this and men cry like this, because it's how they deal with their pain and how we deal with our pain. That's diverse, but we're still both dealing with our pain. And we have to recognize that, because often we talk about anger, you know, I'm angry, and we rarely say, I'm hurt. That hurt me. We say, that pissed me off. So how do we begin to raise our consciousness? What? To see ourselves in our diversity. We're all acting out the same kinds of things, but we're acting them out in very different ways. And diversity is what unifies us. Seeing ourselves in one another is what unifies us. That also brings me to parenting. One of the reasons I brought little Starla, and actually then her name was Tubby, I brought her to remind us that when we're working with the young people, we have to remember who we were when we were them. You know, I think the greatest gift that my mother gave me was choice. And when I asked her, why'd you give me so many choices? She said, because every spanking I ever got was for trying to express myself, share myself. So I had a voice and I had choice. But she also made it very clear, whatever choices you make, you're responsible for the outcome. So she taught me consequences of my behavior. I also wanted to bring her because, you know, we've got some healing to do. And when I say healing, I don't mean like going to the doctor healing. I mean, letting go of the hurts that are over. You know, things hurt us in the present because that happened in the past because we won't let them go. And part of the reason I wanted to bring in that consciousness is because if you are a person of color living in the world, but especially in America, you have experienced lots of unconscious hurts. In other words, people didn't necessarily set out to hurt you, but because of the myths, lies, and stereotypes that they were taught about you, you end up in pain. I want to help you understand that the conversations that we're afraid to have are the conversations that we need to have. And this conversation that I'm bringing up right now is racism. Aunt Kate helped guide me through legal segregation that was rooted and based on racism. It was based on the belief in white supremacy. And it was based on the belief that everything else, everybody else was secondary. I never felt that in my life in terms of how I saw myself and how I saw others. And I didn't have the need to feel superior to anybody else. What I felt was that if we start teaching the truth early on, we can skip over having to deal with all this stuff that we've been dealing with in America and in the world. You know, it amazes me that when people can't see themselves in one another, they can take it to the extreme of exterminating another person. That's how we send soldiers to war. We tell them, oh, those aren't people. And then we give them new names and then we hurt them. Well, it's no different than living in our societies or our cultures, in our nations. It's about understanding that when you see other people, know that they are you, that they are the people that you need to learn more about who you are. You know, when I first moved to California and I was 4, it was the first time I had seen other kinds of people. In Missouri, there were Black people and there were white people. There were some Native Americans, but they looked like us, so we just thought they were Black. I asked my mother, I said, Mom, when I'd see a Asian or a Mexican or even an Italian, I said, who are these people? What are these people? And so she started explaining it to me. And I got very, very excited about it because it was like, oh, someone new to know. As I learned to know these people, the reality was I made friends. I learned different foods and different cultures, and it was really fun. And then I learned something that I hadn't expected. Some of the friends, for example, Nancy and Kathy, they were Japanese. They liked me, and I would go to their house for lunch, you know, during school. I don't know, they don't let you out like that anymore. But back then, they felt it was safer to let the kids leave the campus. And one day, I had a Black friend named Rita, and Rita wanted to play with us. And I said, oh, okay, sure, come on, play with us. And then they stopped, and they went over, and they had a little conversation with each other. They came back, and they said, oh, no, we can't play with her. She's too Black. She said, you're like us, but she's too Black. And that was the first time I realized that racism wasn't about color. It wasn't about a person's color. It was because I had never experienced racism from another colored person consciously. And that was my first exposure. I said, oh, so it makes a difference, even if you're one of the people who's going to be getting the brunt of racism yourself. That was the day I learned that racism is a thought form and anybody can have it. Anybody can have it. And often we miss it because we don't expect it to come from anybody but a white person. But racism isn't white. Racism is a thought form. That's really hard for us to grasp because we're so focused on it coming from a certain space. And then it's important to know that racism doesn't mean that you're going to act out prejudice. What do I mean by that? It isn't synonymous with hate. Are there hateful racists? Of course there are. There's hateful everything. But most people who believe in racism, it's unconscious. They don't even know where it came from. It was taught, it was learned throughout our society. That's why you hear now in our time period, systemic racism. All that means it was institutionalized and we all learned it. And then some of us became conscious enough to purge it, or are still purging it because it's been so ingrained in so much of our culture. Diversity and racism are not synonymous, but where there is diversity, different people of color, you're going to find that there will be some racism. And sometimes where there are only people of color, you're still going to find there's going to be some racism. I saw a show with Lisa Ling, and she was in China, and she was in the largest Barbie doll store in the world. And she was talking to all these beautiful little Chinese girls, and they had their dolls, you know, and she said, and she noticed that none of them had the Chinese Barbie. And so she says, well, where's the Chinese Barbie? Because she was in the store. And they go, oh, no, we like this one, we like this one. And they were holding up Malibu Barbie, you know? And she kept saying, well, what, don't you think the China? No, this is the one. This is the real Barbie, they would say. That's unconscious self-rejection. And they didn't know, and they weren't doing it to reject themselves. And then you can fast forward, and I'm going to encourage any of you who are interested in this that I'm speaking on right now to Google the doll experiment or A Girl Like Me. Both of those will give you a brief study of children between the ages of 3 and 5 and how this systemic racism has already impacted them at that very, very early age. When we understand how early we learn this stuff, then we know how early we need to make sure we're not teaching it because it's learned. You see, nobody popped out of their mother's womb and saying, oh, I'm superior, I'm inferior. Nobody popped out like that. So the messages that we get from society place in our brain negative thoughts, images about others, and even more importantly, about ourselves. I always say to my students, you don't want to become an agent of your own oppression. In other words, nobody has to be around and you're still doing it to yourself. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about in the world today, because the world is becoming conscious and letting nations know that we're more conscious than we as nations used to be. When I saw in Germany a mural of George Floyd, you know, Germany has a bad rap in terms of the Holocaust and all that. But I know that in Germany, they have done more conscious stuff to acknowledge that there was racism, that there is racism, and that they never want there to be another Holocaust again. You know, and so we need to look to those places that are doing things because we don't have to invent the wheel. You know, there's lots of things that have already been done. There are lots of things that people are still doing. You know, I talk about my great aunt Kate a lot because she was my first Black studies teacher. She was living history. She lived through 7 presidencies, you know, so she had a lot to share and a lot to say. And for her to go through the life that she went through and to be such a kind and loving and wise woman, let me know that it's choice. You know, we all go through stuff and then we can decide to let that stuff break us, or we can let that stuff make us. And so I want to offer that because I know that sometimes people have a hard time with, oh, just love, just love, just love. But I have to tell you, love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love transforms, love heals. And one of the things that we need, especially in America, is a healing of racism. And by that means simply purging those negative thoughts out of our mind so we can purge them out of our actions, conscious and unconscious. I'm going to share a woman that I really love. Her name is Jane Elliott. She would be called a white woman, but she doesn't claim that title. And she said, she says that if you're not born a white supremacist, then you're a miracle because it's institutionalized in all our institutions. So I'm going to throw out something for you guys to think about. Think about the first time you became aware of racism or an experience with racism, and just try to get in touch with how old were you? And for some people, the consciousness came much older, but I've been practicing this on some of the people in my workshops, and it's amazing how young so many people are. And I'm going to give you an example from one of my white students. She said when she was a little girl, she and her cousins were in the car in the grocery store, and the parents had gone into the shop. And back then, they used to do that because I was one of those kids. She said that that next to her was a car full of little Black kids. She said they started singing the nigger songs. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. She said she looked at the kids and she started seeing tears running down their eyes. And she said, and I was shocked and I stared at them. She was 5. And she said, and I thought, I didn't know they had feelings. Well, she wasn't able to see herself in them. She wasn't taught to see herself in them. So when she was a student in my class, she talked about that one experience impacted her life so much that she really began to change and purge and study to get away from all those negative things that she had been taught. Not by mean people, but by people that she loved. And the reality is most of the negative stuff that we're taught comes from the miseducation of the people that we love. And they don't do it to hurt us. They don't do it to, in many ways, they do it to protect us. I'm going to give another childhood example. So I'm a little girl, civil rights movement's going on. They're integrating school in Boston. And it was a very violent school desegregation. They were burning buses. They were throwing buses over. They were throwing rocks at buses. And everybody came out to protest these kids, these Black children, coming to their community to go to their schools. And at that time, I was a child. And I was confused. I was like, but they're mothers, because a lot of them were just mamas out there. And I thought, what mother would want to hurt another mother's child? That's my child's thinking. Later, when I got older and I saw footage of that, I thought, those were mothers who loved their children. And based on the things they had been taught, the miseducation, they thought they were protecting their babies. And I know as a mama, the mama lion comes out. We have to start to understand not only what is done, but why it's done. Because when we understand the why, that's how we can really begin to change it. It's like, oh. And one more example from the civil rights movement. And I saw this one on an Oprah Winfrey show. I didn't see this one personally. There was a Black woman who desegregated a school, Central High School. And she didn't get the message not to go that day because there was such a big crowd. And so she walked and she ran into this crowd, and this crowd they called her all kind of names. She was very scared. She was very intimidated, but you saw her closed, but you never saw a tear. And then finally out of the crowd, this white woman comes and takes her and escorts her to the bus stop and gets her on the bus, keeping the crowd from getting worse and worse. So when she was on Oprah, they were sharing that when she was at school, when she finally did go to the school, there was this picture, it was a famous picture on Look magazine of this white woman who was just, coloring her names and her face was all twisted. Well, that woman called her years later to apologize for being one of her tormentors. And they became friends. And she had both of them on her show talking about that. The thing we don't understand is we have to forgive to live. We have to forgive to thrive, and we have to forgive to love. And sometimes we're asked to forgive the unforgivable. But the reality is forgiveness is the gift that you give yourself so you can be free. Forgiveness is the gift you give yourself so that you can be free. Now, people often confuse forgiveness means, well, okay, you did something really horrible and I'm really hurt, but I'm going to forgive you, and so let's hang out. Sometimes it doesn't mean let's hang out. Sometimes it means I have to forgive you and love you from a distance. No, you can't have my address. No, you can't have my phone number, but I forgive you. Why? Because I don't want to take that hurt and that pain on a journey with me. So those are just some of the challenges that we have. I celebrate diversity. I have become more because my friends are so diverse. My children gave me a 70th birthday party. And one of the things that I remember from it, and I'm still high from it, by the way, but one of the things that I remember from it was someone saying, look around this room. She said, who could bring so many different people together? And it's because I surrendered to my life's journey. When I found myself in places where nobody looked like me, I was open to friendship. I was open to learning. And sometimes I was a little pushy about it. It's like one of my dear friends, she said, the day I met her, she said, hi, my name is Sharon. You want to play with us? And her friend Patty said, what'd you ask her for? And I was the only Black child in the school. And so I thought, I'm asked, I'm coming. And then over time, we all became friends. We want people to all automatically just accept us. But sometimes we have to show ourselves because we don't know what they've heard about people that look like us or come from where we come from or speak the way we speak or have what we have or what we don't have. You see, that's how we begin to grow as human beings. There's an African proverb that says, I am because we are. And we are, therefore I am. I come into consciousness of myself by being open enough to interact with others. Whether I agree with them or disagree with them is not the major issue. In America, there was a man named Tom Metzger. I think he's still alive. And he was head of the Ku Klux Klan, which was an anti-people of color organization. I happened to be at the city council, and he showed up, and the Jewish people got up and left in protest. But I was curious. I had never consciously been in the presence of a Ku Klux Klan member, and I thought, well, this is an opportunity. So I listened to what he had to say. And then he was in the hall. I walked up to him. I said, Mr. Metzger, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce myself to you. He goes, okay. And I said, we have a mutual acquaintance in common. I couldn't remember his name, but he was my student. I said, he's your neighbor. Well, he only had one Black neighbor. The head of the Ku Klux Klan had a Black neighbor. And he said to me, oh yeah, he's a really nice guy. And I went, ding, because that was another confirmation that guess what? Even Klan members, not all of them, some of them are very hateful, but most of them aren't. They just believe in the narrative that they've been taught. They've been taught a narrative that this is a white man's country, that white men are supposed to be in charge, and that anybody else trying to get a position of power is a danger and a threat. And so they've spent a lot of energy to try to terrorize people into not exercising their freedoms and their rights. That's it. I stopped being afraid of the Klan. I was like, okay, I don't have to fear them. I have to understand them. And then I have to still do me in spite of them. You see, whatever barriers come before us, it's an opportunity for us to learn how to climb them, to go around them, or bust through them. We have all those options and more because we're creative people, you see. So we have to see ourselves in one another. And we have to celebrate our differences. We don't have to believe the same things. We don't have to like the same things. We don't even have to have the same values. We have to acknowledge that human beings have the right to be. And one of the things we have the right to be is to be different. But we have to also learn how to see ourselves in the differences. We all eat, we eat different things. We all dance, we dance different ways. We all sing, we like different kind of music and songs. You know, we all cry, we all hurt, and we do it in different ways. You know, I just want to bring it right back around to George Floyd for one more time. And the only reason is because the situation, the killing that brought the world to enlighten and respond wasn't about George Floyd. It was about our consciousness and our awareness of learning how to care about people who don't look like us because they are us. Human beings, we are one another. So how do we begin to do that? We begin to say, hey, I'm going to learn more so that I can grow more, so that I can be more. That's our challenge. So are there any questions, Marlene? Because I don't want to take up the whole time because I get on a roll and I get excited. Okay. So in terms of love and healing, you know, when you think about your own hurts and think about how they made you feel. And most of the time it made you feel unloved. It's like, how could you do this to me? How could you say this to me? How could you treat me this way? How could you exclude me this way? Well, one of the reasons I so believe in self-love is because when I love myself, I feel fearless. Let me give you an example. I told you that I desegregated 2 schools. I desegregated one in Missouri and I desegregated one in Altadena, California. And in Missouri, I desegregated it with all my cousins. In Altadena, I was alone. And I asked myself, actually recently, how come I wasn't afraid? Because I lived in a community where nobody looked like me. I walked to school by myself. I didn't see any people that looked like me. And then I realized that that little girl in me had learned, when she put on that armor that Aunt Kate gave her, that I felt protected always. Because I believe that I am myself and more, and I never walk alone. And I would sing a song on the way to school. Went, oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. It was staying in the positive that helped me not focus on the negative or the potential negative. Do you realize that most of what we worry about hasn't happened and probably won't? But think of all the hours we spent worrying about it, all the ways we let that stop us from being and growing. When I went to school and started making friends, I thought to myself, I want to join things. So there was the Girl Scouts. I wanted to join the Girl Scouts. When I joined the Girl Scouts, the leader quit. She said, I refuse to be the leader of a troop with a nigga in it. But it didn't make me say, oh, maybe I shouldn't join. I said, okay, I'm joining. And my white friend said, thanks for joining because we didn't like her anyway. And I shared that to say, we have positive and negatives, even in the negatives. And so we have to decide where we want to put our focus. One of the beautiful things about being in my school, and it was near the first part of being at the school, was my teacher gave us an assignment to talk about where our ancestors came from. And so students just started talking. I'm Scottish, I'm Dutch, I'm German, and French, I'm all these things. And at that time, I was 9 years old. And I said to myself, well, where do Negroes come from? I think it was the first time I really understood the power of words. Because I'd been told all my life I was Negro. I was told I was colored. And if they weren't nice, I might have been called a nigger from time to time. I didn't know where my ancestors came from. And I was starting to panic because I already understood that there were people who thought of me as inferior. And I wanted to know the answer. So when the teacher got to me, she said, and as we all know, Starla's ancestors came from Africa. Starla went, you know, because no one had ever said that to me, ever. And I sitting there thinking, how does everybody else know? Because they were all in agreement. And Starla didn't know. So I went home and I said to my mom, I said, Mom, did you know that we come from Africa? And she said, yeah, baby, but I know she said, yeah, but that was a long time ago. So I said, well, can I call Aunt Kate? I wanted to go to the wisdom source. I said, Aunt Kate, did you know that we came from Africa? She said, oh, yeah, baby. My daddy was one of the first Africans to get here. I said, oh. Our challenge is to tell people the family history. See, we talk about world history. We talk about nation history. We don't even know family history. Who are these people? How are we connected? You know, and I don't have to see you to learn my history about you. I just need somebody to tell me. I recently discovered that one of our family members created a museum many years ago about our family. I didn't even know it existed, you know? And being in that museum, I discovered that he had a gift from his neighbor. Well, actually, it was his neighbor's son. And his neighbor's son said, you know, this has been in our family for generations. And, you know, grandma's gone and papa's gone. So I think your family should have this. Well, these neighbors would go back and forth with my great aunt. And they'd have coffee every morning. This is not Aunt Kate. This is a different great aunt. Well, what he gave her was the sales receipt because his family had owned our family. And we had no clue. You see, our histories, our cultures, our life experiences, they're very intertwined. And they don't have to make us be at odds with one another. They can allow us to find points of connection. Diversity is an opportunity to celebrate our differences, you know, and I love to celebrate our life, to celebrate love, and then to acknowledge those things that are real and that are painful, but not to sit in that, but to help transform it. You know, I don't really talk about changing things. I talk about transforming them. I talk about transcending them because in transforming and transcending, things will change. I also want to talk about children because I love that girl. And our children are our future. So we can change things quickly by giving our children the truth, accurate information, by teaching them how to deal with hurt and pain, by teaching them how to see themselves in one another. And children are good at that anyway. So really, it isn't about that we have to teach them. We have to get out of their way. And they have to stop hearing us say so many negative things about ourselves and other people. You know, I believe children live their parents' lives. And so what we're going through, they're going through it. How do we give them the skills to get past it? By developing them for ourselves so that they can see us get past it, so that they know and understand that it's possible because they have examples of the possibility. You know, I look at people learning about slavery. Well, slavery didn't have slaves, it had enslaved people. And those people came from someplace else. And so before you teach me my slave history, teach me my world history, because we're a global people. And then I can see not only have I contributed to the world, but I survived one of the lowest points in my life. You know, some of my friends who are African American talk about how they hated learning about slavery, how it made them feel really bad, how they were embarrassed, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, really? I said, when I learned about slavery, I thought, wow, how strong did you have to be to survive that? How creative did you have to be to survive that? How did we survive that? So I saw it as a source of strength. And I would listen to Aunt Kate, who used to say, baby, you got to learn how to make a way out of no way, which means that I didn't see the lack of resources, because even if there were no resources, I was the resource. I had a brilliant mind that could help transcend, if you will, some of the statements and things I've been taught. But even the things that I didn't know, I knew that because of our mind, we have, and when we open our minds, you know, we have access to all information. You know, our genius is in us. I was asked to do a presentation at a prison for children. It was a youth facility in Claremont, California. And I went to do the presentation, and I could just see that there was an unrest in the audience. And so I changed my speech. I didn't do what I came to do. They wanted me to teach history, and I did. I threw some little history in the beginning of it. I said, why are you all sitting over there by yourselves, calling yourselves Black people, and you're sitting over there calling yourselves white people, and you're sitting over there calling yourselves brown people, and you're sitting over there calling yourselves Asian? And I said, why don't you know that you're the same people? And they looked at me, and I said, I'm here to teach you who you are. Well, if you've never been booed by 500 people, that's a kind of a resounding experience. But what I was telling them was, when you popped out of your mother's womb, somebody was supposed to tell you that you are brilliant. Nobody is born in the world without a brilliant light to shine. I said to them, somebody was supposed to tell you that you are powerful, and that you're either going to use your power in the positive or you're going to use it in the negative, but you're going to use it because you're free. You're free to choose. You know, many people think they're not born free. We're born free, and then stuff happens. But we have that freedom seed in us. And so we have to cultivate that and have the courage to express it in the world. I said to them, when you popped out of your mother's womb, someone was supposed to tell you you're limitless, multi-talented, multifaceted. I have a book that my granddaughter, and I wrote, and it's called I Am My Own Self-Validation. And those are, once again, Aunt Kate's words. She said, baby, you got to be your own self-validation. And in the book, when you open it, all kinds of messages come. Well, one of the messages that I even find most people have the hardest to really embrace is a message that says you are magnificent beyond your imagination. We can't even comprehend of our possibilities, because that's how great we are. I think that's exciting. It's like living a life on a journey to know more about how great you are, you know, self-discovery, if you will. But the incarcerated youth responded to all those messages. And then finally, which I think is the most important message, at least from my perspective, I said, when you popped out of your mother's womb, somebody was supposed to tell you that you are love. Not loved, that you are the thing itself, and that you're here to manifest that in the world. And if we manifest it, we'll find that we become like love magnets. You don't have to go find somebody to love you. They'll show up because you're the love magnet, you know, and then you have the power to choose. And so I really want to put this message into the world so that we can begin to vibrate in the love energy, the love essence, the love knowledge, the love healing, the love teaching, you know. I was teacher of the year 7 times. And I think the only reason I was teacher of the year 7 times was because I loved my students. And in doing that, they loved me back. I respected my students. And in doing that, they respected me back. You know, I hear civility in the classroom and confrontation and all that kind of stuff. It didn't happen because students were respected, they were loved, and they were allowed a voice. You know, we all want our voices to matter. We all want to be heard. And I said, well, okay, we can have voice, but we have to learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. That can be done. And we can take that into our homes. We don't have to believe everything and agree to everything. We just have to be able to express ourselves with respect for ourselves. You see, I have one rule in my classroom, and it's respect yourself. Why? Because if you respect yourself, the rest of us will be respected. You know, you don't have to respect me because I'm the authority. I'm just a divine reflection of you. And so when you value you, my life gets better. When you love you, I don't have to worry about feeling danger or harm, because when people vibrate in love, that's a different kind of essence and energy. You know, I want to make it personal. I have the best friends. I have the best friends. They look out for me. They create opportunities for me. They show up for me in so many ways. And when I had my 70th birthday party, I literally had in the room friends from elementary school all the way past college to my present colleagues. And this is so significant. They were of every kind of ethnicity. They were every kind of just economic level. I mean, it was just amazing. And they're good friends. They're trusted friends. One of the reasons that the room was filled with so much love is because my daughters said to me when they were planning this amazing gathering for me, they said, the only people you can invite are people that you absolutely know love you. And it was a room filled with love that not only celebrated me, but helped people celebrate each other. You know, if you've never been a room filled with love, I just highly recommend it. And you can create that anytime for yourself because you know who loves you. And I really want to take this opportunity to say the world is my home. I was born in Springfield, Missouri. I have lived in California and other places. I am an American citizen, but I truly believe in my heart of heart that I am a citizen of the world, a world citizen. I believe that wherever I go, I can make a place for myself. I believe that wherever I go, I can learn more about myself in a deeper way through learning about others. This is our world. We can't just care about the piece of land that we're living on or standing on. We have to care about the whole thing. Why? Because everything is functionally connected to everything else. What happens in the United States of America impacts people on the other side of the world. We have to acknowledge that. What happens, people in different economic communities impacts all the economic communities. What happens to the young impacts the old, and what happens to the old impacts the young. And that's why diversity is so important, so that we can see how we affect one another, and so that we can begin to do that which is, I think, so necessary for living. Care about one another and be kind to one another and help one another, you know, and love one another. When I think of myself, I think of my mother, Rose Carolyn England Lewis. She had me one day after her 18th birthday. And the one thing she consistently demonstrated and taught me was to love. And so when I think of myself, I just simply say, I love. I love.